Well, yep. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Eric Whitting, Te whenua. E mahi anau me te, mo te Mahi Taiao mō Ngāti Kuri. Aloha mai ka haere ki te reo tuaroa tēnei whenua. Greetings to you all. My name is Eric Whitting, and I'm originally from Whakatane, Tātaki Whakatane area. So I'd like to meet you to those who surround me as I grew up, which is Te Haumihi Iwi, Ngāti Iwi, te maunga putuaki me ngā awa rangitaki Whakatane, rawa ko te awa tarawera. I'm lucky enough to mahi in Mahi Taiao for Ngāti Kuri, aka my in-laws. For the last 31 years, been part of our Ngāti Kuri whānau. Our whāngai tamariki that my husband and I raised are all Ngāti Kuri. Of course, our grandchildren are Ngāti Kuri, and now our great-grandchildren are Ngāti Kuri. So I feel the responsibility of working with Mahi Taiao for Ngāti Kuri very keenly. And I'd like to invite you also to Ngāti Katoa, whose lands we are on, and also to the University of Auckland. Our very first mokopuna is attending their second year here, so it's special to be here where she is wandering around somewhere. Anyway, not in science, but psychology, technology. Anyway, Te Haumihi is the environment of Ngāti Kuri. So if you want to know where Ngāti Kuri are based, drive north, keep on driving until you run out of islands, and Taikaia is down in the bottom of the picture there. Ngāti Kuri already starts around where the harbour is on the little east further down, and extends up to the top of the island. And to say something about the geological history, the very top of the island, you can see the spit of sand. North of that, until about 70,000 years ago, geologically speaking, was an island, and everything south of that, joining to almost to Kaikaia, is one giant sand spit known as a tombolo, where it's filled in. So the area at the very top is very, the Taiao there is very unique, with a huge number of endemic species only found up there.
There's you can use the arrows on the keyboard. Yeah. I hope. Let me try. Try again. There you go.
Yeah. And we have, I don't know if we could say it's a whakataiki, but I consulted with our co-counsellor recently, and they have given us this possible whakataiki. Nā rātou tātou ni te aku, mā tātou rātou e atawhai. They have looked after us. This is the basic version. Now it is our time to look after them. And we're speaking about the relationship with the species in the Taiao that sustained the people of Ngāti Kuri for a long time. And now it's our time to look after them in turn. Who we are. Ngāti Kuri, aha koa he iti he paumamu. Now this is a well-known proverb or whakatauki. Ngāti Kuri are descendants of the Waka Kura Haupō. Ngāti Kuri it's a small iwi. We have two marae, and the main settlement area is Te Haumihi, which is east of Te Rerenga Wairua, Te Rerenga, and it has a population of about 250. And most of my kaimahi colleagues are actually from Te Haumihi. I'm a bit of a townie. I live in Kaitaia myself. But our actual Taiao team consists of 14 rangers, office-based support staff, and many of, as I said, live in Te Haumihi. Now, just to say, Kaitaia and our shops area is, it's the main area to get resources from. So for our kaimahi, that's a 200-kilometre return trip. You just want to go to Pakistan. So that tells you something about our resourcing. or that kind of thing that you have to plan out. We also claim Mahi for the outlying islands. Manawataki is also known as the Three Kings of, how far, 30 kilometres?
50 nautical miles.
About 50 nautical miles off Te Haumihi, again. Very high levels of endemism of species. They are basically last connected to the mainland about 5 million years ago. And unfortunately, many species were on the verge of extinction. There were two species, the Kaikomako and the Tikamathi, that were down to one plant from each species because of goats being liberated there because of with the government for shipwreck sales. Now, halfway to Tonga is Ngāti Kuri, also called Raoul Island, part of the Kermadec chain. And it's a fairly young island, about 1.5 million years old. And what is on there is a taonga, the Ngāti Kuri Kaita. Now, Kaita is the kupu for Huitakawa, but it's Tūturu word for Huitakawa in the far north. And there is an actual species there, Myrtle curvidensis. It's the dominant tree species. So if you imagine that island 10 kilometres by 7, and it is basically covered in Huitakawa. And it's probably 90% of the canopy is Huitakawa. And we have iwi trips, their research trips about twice a year. And it's magnificent to see that many Huitakawa absolutely everywhere. However, Myrtle is a factor, and I'll get to that. It's also an active volcano. As you can see, there's a central crater there. So we have a lot of health and safety issues with accessing that island. The relationship with the Ngāti Kuri and Ngāti Kuri is very deep and ancient. Kura Haupo, the waka that Ngāti Kuri is descended from, actually was in damage as people travelled through the moana and stopped, and the people stayed there for quite a while conducting repairs. There are many other iwi that also have legends of Ngāti Kuri as a place to resupply when they wait out settle. So, Te Haumihi Maui, the North Island, we are the tip of the tail, and the head of the tail is down in Poreke, Wellington area. So if you talk to our people like my mother-in-law before she passed away, they talk about going up to Wellington or up to Auckland because you're going towards the head of the fish. So Ngāti Kuri consider themselves at the tail of the country. So the very tip, as I said, was an island. So many species in that area are only found in that area. And if we look on the top right-hand corner of the tip of the island there, that's also known as the whole area is Otu, but the cliffs, the Kurua, also called Fieldwork cliffs. That is an area that is even more unique. Serpentine rocks, which only pop out in the Nelson area and then up in New Caledonia. So the biome, the species found there are even more unique than that. So very, very unusual area. So we have a lot of mahi. We're basically Jack and Jills of all trades, or kaimahi who are all over the whenua. One of the main things we're working under a kaupapa Māori, the tikanga, revitalising pūrākau, because unfortunately government policies had alienated the people from the land, like literally forced people off into certain areas, and then not allowing people back into the ngāhere, into the environment, through fencing or government laws. And so some knowledge was lost. So we're regaining that. We operate under the tikanga Māori, and every day of the week. But in terms of boots on the ground, we're involved in everything. We're pest trapping. We don't have wallabies or deer, but we're trapping possums, rodents, mustelids, species, birds, eco sourcing, seed, plant propagation, revegetation. We've got a nursery for different size. protecting our threatened species such as the Ngāti Kuri, which I'll talk about in a moment. Pukapaka, which is our land snail that is only found up there, although Ngāti Wai have a closely related species. We are Whale Strategic Response. We are Mahi Taiao. We have a team that is working with freshwater systems, monitoring and protection, the freshwater and the sea fish. Disease response and monitoring, Haole dieback and Myrtle rust. We are happy to say that we do not, as yet, have any Haole dieback that we know of, and we're testing. We are the area that doesn't have Haole dieback. The old Mahi challenges, traditional knowledge has been lost through alienation that I've up to. Working with government agencies, we may have data we require, but it was either never collected, it's incomplete, or it contradicts itself because data was collected in different ways from different years. Where that acts of God, we are very susceptible to weather events. For example, we had no power for a day or two the other week. We might have roads cut off, not be able to access Mahi, not be able to leave the Mahi area because of flooding. Logistically challenges, we work in a very remote area, like some of you might be from remote areas too, and even just getting resourcing can be an issue. Also, starting from scratch, data might not have been collected because it wasn't seen as being important. So our ArcGIS training is critical. As you can see here, we've gone up a river valley. All those different icons represent different tree species. You can see a couple of those icons. There's only one of that species in that valley. So I think the light blue is the emu, for example. There was one tree in the whole valley. The areas to the right and left were farmed, so there was only a small number of big trees left behind, and the rest is manuka. Dioecious tree species, if you're familiar with that, where you've got the old male and female tree. And if that's a species with a female tree and the next male tree is 2 kilometres away, it's a bit of an issue for us because hand pollinating can be a bit dangerous if the tree's like 6 metres tall. So leading on from that, our real taonga, Ngāti Metroceros Bātetai. This was, and I use the quote, discovered because the trees are in near path sites, so the tupuna would have been a part of their lives because the trees left behind are all near path. However, it was scientifically discovered in 1975 by a Pākehā researcher who was actually looking for lichens and didn't know what tree the lichen he spotted was growing on. And it's the only large tree flowering, white flowering Metroceros. It starts out as a vine, becomes a giant tree up to 30 metres tall. 31 trees when it was discovered in 3 different groups. Now we have 19, unfortunately, because Auckland met them like popcorn. There's not a lot of pollination in terms of self-pollination. Those groups of trees are very closely related to the immediate trees in their group. You don't get a lot of fertile seed. However, they do grow well from cuttings, so we're now starting to plant them out with the support of the Botanic Gardens here in Auckland. And like we said, we're planting them out in groups of trees from different whakapapa lines, so you will get fertile seeds starting to form. In Te Haumihi, this tree is quite resistant to myrtle rust. We have heard because the trees are being sold in nurseries and being planted in other parts of the whenua, like Auckland and down in Wellington, that observations of myrtle rust on the tree are happening. So the natural area, we've got a lot of young trees planted around our base. We're not seeing them back. We did see myrtle rust in a few of our trees still in pots. and then the leaves were removed and it didn't grow, didn't turn up again on those trees. The Rangi Tāpoi Taika. So the Kumene Pūtakawa, it does hybridize with the mainland Pūtakawa. It's the dominant tree species of the Rangi Tāpoi. It flowers, the difference is it flowers up to 9 months per year on the island, and not all over the whole tree, but in individual branches. It was first, Myrtle rust was first seen on the island in 2017, and we see death of individual branches on the island, but you don't see the entire tree dying. So monitoring is pretty different because it's difficult because the island is 3 days away by boat. And, it's very expensive to go there. So we do get sponsorship and some api from research partners, such as University of Auckland, Auckland Museum, and api whenua groups such as that. Now, as I said, it hybridizes with the mainland taika, the mainland pūtakawa. So if you see your pūtakawa on the mainland flowering out of season, there is a good chance that it's actually a hybrid with, say, locally sold Kumene taika, or it is a Kumene taika that somebody has actually planted out in the motuki. Now, I thought I'm not going to show you guys the pressing dead tree, for example. So I've shown you from our nursery, this is our lama, and these are our seed growing ones, growing very well. So, our observations in the field, our Mahi Taiao here, the swamp Mahi, unfortunately we've found about 100% of them are infected, and with most trees unfortunately dead or dying. Now, with the data problem I was talking about, it's taken us a couple of years to find our swamp Mahi, because we had to go through actually the Australasian virtual herbarium, which had records from 1979, where people had seen the swamp Mahi. And then from then on, it would just say, oh, they're in this particular valley. And with rugged valleys, it took us a very long time to find those trees. Unfortunately, even though our first observation of Myrtle bust in the area was 2 years ago, it looks like those trees have been infected for at least 5 years. And even the big trees are basically matiana. Some of the smaller trees are still alive. So this is where we're talking maybe about the spraying aspects. So we're very keen on listening to that. That's the worst. As I said, the Rangi Tāpoi Kaipā infection is widespread, but it doesn't appear to be killing the trees on the island. Individual branches have died off, but the rest of the tree looks like they're doing fine. Lama, it's pretty rare in our area. We've had a few infected rake. And those seem to be the trees that are further away from the streams. They look a bit stressed, they're a bit dry in areas. The rama we're finding that are growing near the streams, even if they're close to the infected Mahi Taiao swamp Mahi, seem to be very healthy. And that's the same with our rata moitei and even our northern rata. They can be right next to an infected or dying swamp Mahi, but there's no sign of infection in those. So very interesting because they're part of a mega cloud of spores with them. Mainland taika, the mainland pūtakawa, we've only seen one, even though it's a common tree, we've seen one infected tree, and that was epicomate growth from a cut stump. And that was what happened. We cut that right back and burnt it. But all our other pūtakawa, we've not seen any infection, which is interesting because we've got thousands of them. Yeah. Very like Kaipaya, 100k south of us, very different infection there. We're seeing it on pūtakawa and Kaipaya quite commonly, in other species down here. So what we're seeing in terms of not or no infections, says Jim, Lily or brush cherry, whatever species we've got there, we're not seeing any infection of that at all, which is kind of disappointing because some of it is spreading from planted trees on farms or properties into the bush with our kukupa, our kiridu. And we're like, well, that could do with getting a lot, but it seems to be perfectly healthy. The other Metrocineris lanata species we've got up in the bush, we've not seen any infection on them at all, including infulgence, the red flower, orange flower vine. You know, it looks perfect. You know, issue, even if it's really close to infected swamp monkey. So we had about 6 questions that we're hoping to get some answers for here. Because the peninsula, there's very, the tāwhiri mate, the winds are a huge factor. It looks like a lot of our areas totally dry out between rainfall events, so they're a major factor in the lack of infection. Do we have unique microbes or fungi in Te Haumihi that are helping prevent the infection? We know that with that huge amount of endemism, that we've got a lot of unique, even microbiology in our area. In fact, researchers have just found a new species of lichen unknown to science that only grows on young cloudy plants, for example. It hasn't even been named yet. Kawa communities of Metrocineris in Lama Lama, with Myrtle found within the groves have been dying, avoiding infection themselves, because we've even got, you know, lots of seedlings growing right below these dead swamp monkey or dying swamp monkey. It's, you know, it's a bit of a conundrum to us. And then these other partai, what is the infection status of our rangitā or on the mainland compared to back on the island? Is it behaving more like the mainland is Pūtikawa? This picture is Lama Lama hanging over the stream. That stream, even last week, was 4 meters higher, and that entire Lama Lama is underwater for like a few days at a time. So we're wondering if these Lama Lama that are often fully immersed, like from the root to the top of the foliage, if that's somehow a factor in preventing infection. And why are Ngāti Moiho showing infection in areas south of the natural range where they've been planted versus us not seeing any infection in our actual natural and planted trees in Te Haumihi. So, yeah, partai that we would love to know the answer of, So anyway, you can help us out, or you will give us some input. Anyway, that's me, Kia ora. Attention and me to Ngāti Kuri for supporting me and pushing me to do this. And my final notes, may all your rata, all your trees remain healthy. May your trees remain healthy, may your lizards and birds be vigorous, and may your whales be of a reasonable size. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.